I was about 10 or so when I had what I think was a dream, but I'm not positive it was only a dream. You see, I live in a rural area of North Alabama, and off the highway heading into town, there used to be a raised, I'll call it a shack for lack of a better word, and I had seen it many times. One night, I was summoned to it. All I know is that I went to bed, and the next thing I knew, I was standing in the doorway of this shack. There was a lady there, and she seemed shocked to see me. Even though she seemed surprised by my sudden appearance, she invited me in. We sat and talked for a time. She told me that I had a gift, and that I was blessed by the Fae with foresight. It was around that time that I began to hear angry voices from outside. The lady seemed upset and told me I needed to go. At the time, I didn't understand, and I tried to explain that I didn't know how I had gotten there. But she never got the chance to respond. Someone threw fire into the shack, and it began to burn. The fire caught quickly and spread rapidly over the fabrics that decorated the place. She pushed me away from her just in time to save me from being scalded by the encroaching flames. The next thing I knew, it was about 8 a.m. on Saturday morning. I went downstairs like normal and told my parents about my dream. They said I had a vivid imagination. Later that day, I went into town with my dad. We drove past the field with the shack, and both the field and the shack were burnt black and still smoldering in places, like there had been a terrible fire there the night before. The shack was destroyed. No one has ever built on the site since then, and over the years, it's been reclaimed by nature. Ever since then, though, I occasionally have dreams or visions of things that have not yet occurred. I also catch things out of the corner of my eye, but when I turn to look, nothing's there. The oddest thing, though, is that I'll hear someone calling a name that I know somehow is mine, but I can never quite remember it. While at other times I'll feel a hand on my back or shoulder. Well, that's my story, and to give reference, I'm almost 29 now. If you do read my story, I would love to know what people think of this, if they believe I encountered one of the Fae, and what it all means. It was the summer of 2016. I went on a camping trip with my uncle, some friends, and a cousin to visit a local waterfall called Balagbag. I was excited since I hadn't been out there in a long time. It took about 4 hours to get there from our home. When we reached the mountain, we hiked a long path to get to the falls, which poured spectacularly over the rocks. It was a perfect day. We went swimming in the pool at the base of the falls and found a secret path behind the falling water. There were protruding rocks there behind the falls, and a friend of mine whispered that water elementals would sit there sometimes. As darkness fell, we set up our tents and then cooked dinner over a grill. Unfortunately, the night that was to come would not be nearly as perfect as the day had been. The darkness around our campsite was deep and intense. It made me nervous. A couple of my friends were acting brave, like they weren't disturbed by the darkness, but I could tell they were putting on a front. That night, I had trouble falling asleep, tossing and turning in my tent for what seemed like hours. When I finally fell asleep, I had a strange and frightening dream that left an impact on me. In the dream, I was in a vintage-looking house, and I was sitting down next to a family, a husband, a wife, and a son. The son seemed to be about my age. They didn't seem familiar. They were wearing these beautiful, old-fashioned clothes and had braids in their hair, which was long and dirty blonde. They looked otherworldly. I was holding a cup of tea, but I can't remember if I drank from it. The wife then spoke. She asked if I would marry her son. I said no, right away. Then she asked again, "Will you marry my son?" And again I said no. She continued to ask me the same question again and again, becoming more insistent and intense each time she asked. This frightened me, and I started to get up to leave. At this point, the wife got angry. She said, "Come back here, now!" All three of them were angry. I felt like I had to get out of there, and the next thing I knew, I was outside in a gigantic garden. This garden was maze-like, but I was very quickly able to find a gate. It wouldn't open. It wouldn't let me through, no matter how much I struggled with it. Then, suddenly, I was back in the house. The family was still there. I felt like they wanted to kill me. I saw a big open window, and I ran and jumped through it. Then I raced through the garden as the family, the husband, the son, and especially the wife, chased after me with gardening tools. And I knew that if they caught me, they would kill me. I felt like I was running for my life. Then this door suddenly appeared out of nowhere. I opened it, and in that instant, I woke up. I couldn't shake the sense of fear that morning. It stayed with me long after the dream. I told my uncle I wanted to leave as soon as possible. I felt instinctively that my dream was connected in some way to the falls and to the deep darkness that had gathered around the campsite the night before. Later, I told my uncle and grandma about the dream, and they said, "Hala," in my native language, which means, "Oh no." I haven't gone back to the falls since then, and I don't plan to. I think sometimes that if I had said yes to that proposal in the dream, if I had agreed to marry that woman's son, that I never would have woken up. That I would have been stuck in that dream world forever. I want to share my dream encounter with the Fae. This happened on a Saturday in the summer of 2019. I remember I was extremely tired after a long day at work. I came home in the afternoon from an early shift and took a shower and then went to sleep. And then I dreamed. The dream started fairly typically. I was in some sort of apartment complex with clothes hanging on the balcony, living with different people. It felt very 70s. I remember on my way out of the apartment, I told the people I was living with that I was going somewhere. Then the dream changed. I was in this thick, deep forest. Everything was green and fresh and new, the way things feel after a rainstorm. I could almost smell the rich, earthy scent of the wet ground. It was early autumn, and I felt at home and happy walking between those huge trees. Then, in the deepest part of the forest, I found a little cottage with high, thick stone walls covered in green moss. I had the sense that this house was hard to find, like it was well hidden, and felt quite proud to have found it. Inside, I found a cozy living room with a fire crackling in the fireplace, and a kitchen with cookies and sweets and teacups on the table. I sat at the table and had some tea, feeling at peace. Then I saw myself leaving the house to go somewhere else. I was wearing green and brown clothing, camouflaged colors. A brown pair of pants, leather jacket and boots, and a green scarf around my neck, and a green hat. I was on a cobblestone path. I don't know where I was going, but somehow I felt a sense of direction and determination, if that makes sense. I could see that between the trees were big houses, well, more like mansions actually. Then up ahead I saw 3 figures who seemed to be waiting for me. One even waved at me. I waved back. I don't know who these people were, but in the dream I knew them, and I smiled at them and hurried to catch up with them. They were also wearing green and brown clothing. When I got close to them, I noticed that they were tall and beautiful, like movie star beautiful. They had thick blonde or dark hair, flawless skin with bright blue-green or deep dark eyes. There were 2 men and 1 woman. We had a conversation, smiling and laughing. I don't remember what it was about, but I knew that we were not speaking English. As we spoke, we walked down the path to this nearby grassy meadow where other similar people sat. They were beautiful as well and dressed in green and brown. They were sitting under this big tree, like an oak or an elder tree, I don't know. I noticed that they had books in their hands, like they were having a lesson of some kind. Then I had a book too. When I opened my book, I froze. On one of the pages was a lifelike drawing of me. Only I looked different. I looked almost like a blue-skinned fairy with moth wings and huge black eyes. I was sitting on a flower. At the same time, someone was talking to me, to all of us, like a teacher. She was telling us about, and I quote, the essence of the soul. That's the last thing I remember before I woke up feeling refreshed. Soon after, I realized I had slept for an entire day. I woke up on Sunday afternoon at the exact same time I had gone to sleep the day before. I had been asleep for a full 24 hours. That's never happened to me before. My sense is that I dreamed about elves, and that maybe it was more than just a dream, but it's all just a feeling. I don't have any proof, at least, not yet. This happened when I was a kid. I think it was a recurring dream, but I might have been awake the first time it happened. It seems so silly now, but I remember it vividly. I was eating Cocoa Puffs watching Saturday morning cartoons when everything went quiet, even the TV. Then a girl walked into my room. She was shiny and white, almost like a pearl, and she had flowers. I knew right away that she was a fairy, even though she didn't have wings and wasn't tiny. I knew she was old, too, even though she looked young. She walked to the wall, knocked 4 times, and this is the really silly part, she walked into the wall. She didn't talk, but I just knew her name was Goldenrod, and that she lived in the field next to our house, located in the Pine Barrens. I wasn't afraid, and after she had disappeared, I noticed that the room smelt good, like pine. I dreamt about her 3 more times after that day, and I would often see golden lights out in the field when I gazed out the window. I know she wasn't a ghost, and even though I dreamt about her, I felt she wasn't just a dream. She wanted me to leave a cup of honey outside on the porch for her, and I would do so often. I remember I used to get in trouble for it, and I would tell my parents that I had to leave the honey out there for Goldenrod. I used to eat a lot of honey back then too. I used to crave it and would always have this urge to leave some of it out on the porch. I don't know what fairies are, but I think they might be manifestations of nature. I used to have these reoccurring dreams as a child. I'm not sure when they began, but I know they ended on my 10th birthday because I distinctly recall the disappointment I felt that year when they stopped. These creatures used to appear outside my window after I'd gone to bed at night. They would never come inside, but rather would communicate with me and signal to me to get out of bed and join them in a way I don't recall. There were about 5 or 6 of them. They were fluid-like beings dressed in thin white material that was always and perpetually flowing, as if in the wind or underwater. Some of their faces appeared old, others young, and others still middle-aged, and some were male and others were female. They had legs and feet, though I don't recall ever seeing their feet touch the ground, or even the windowsill. They communicated with me without words. They always wanted the same thing, to take me away for the night, to fly above the rooftops and treetops throughout my neighborhood. The experience was thrilling, flying through the air hand in hand with these beings who were keeping me in flight. I felt like Peter Pan. They always brought me safely back to my room by the end of the night. As we were out flying, I got the impression there was an exchange going on, that they were absorbing the excitement from me somehow, but not draining me like they were vampires, more like my excitement provided them with energy in a way that giving someone a gift and seeing them appreciate it gives you satisfaction. It was always a positive experience. I went willingly with them. I trusted them. I knew whatever happened was under my control, where we were going to fly and when I was going to return. I always slept deeply after these encounters, though I always briefly awoke at the point of being back in my bed. For many years, I believed these experiences were just odd childhood dreams, but I later discovered that the details of the things I saw from that flying bird's eye view were accurate and not things I could have deduced myself as a child. I don't know what they were, but I can say that as a child with older sisters, I was aware of what ghosts were and never felt or suspected these to be ghosts. I felt they were not human, but strange creatures with the ability to fly and communicate without words. In retrospect, I do believe they were fairies. As to what fairies are, I have no clue, but I do feel that they are beings that visit from another realm. I've dealt with a lot of anxiety in my life, which has only gotten worse lately with everything going on in the world. I'm sure many people can relate. I'm not very religious, though at times like this, I kind of wish I was. It would be reassuring to have some kind of higher power to turn to when the going gets tough. There's just a lot of uncertainty swirling around. It's hard to make sense of things, to figure out what's true. Again, I'm sure many people can relate. But I recently had a strange dream that was reassuring to me, and I want to share it in the hopes that it might be reassuring for other people too. In the dream, I was climbing into a boat, one of those small rowboats. There were others on the boat, but I didn't know them. It felt like we were all strangers sharing some kind of public transit system, if that makes sense. It was like we didn't know each other, but we were all headed on the same journey. This part of the dream was extremely vivid. I could feel the boat bobbing up and down, hear the waves splashing and swishing along the sides, and even smell that marshy smell that lakes have sometimes. I had the sense that somebody was moving the boat forward, but I wasn't aware of any oars or anything like that. Then the dream shifted, either that or I have a memory gap in this spot, and I was on an island in front of a large school. I just knew it was a school. Someone approached me. It was a man who I recognized. In the dream, I thought he was one of my ex-boyfriends, but in reality, I have no idea who this person was. But I greeted him, and he asked me for directions. I told him I couldn't give him directions because I didn't know where I was. I knew I was in front of a school, but I didn't know the name of the school or anything about it. And for some reason, I was convinced that if I could just find out the name of the school, then I'd be able to figure out where I was and give him directions. So he and I went inside and started looking around, trying to figure out what this school was called. We walked through a classroom filled with students. They were very beautiful, fae-like, though they were dressed in normal, modern clothing. They seemed confused. They stared at us as if we didn't belong there, as if we had interrupted their class. I told the teacher we were looking for the name of the school, and he pointed me towards a door. Me and my quote-unquote ex-boyfriend went through that door and found a spiral staircase that went down into darkness. We descended the stairs and found a small room. The room was like a catacomb or a tomb, but one that had been taken over by nature. The walls were covered in moss, making it almost look like a grotto. In the middle of the room lay a body on a slab or possibly some kind of altar. The body was clothed in very regal attire. At first I thought it was a woman, a queen, but when I got closer I realized it was a man, a king, a fairy king. He was very beautiful. He looked strong, and yet his face was gentle at the same time. There was a crown on his head. And I knew immediately that the school was named after this king. I also knew that the king was dead, but I felt simultaneously that he was asleep and meant to wake up again at some point in the future. Then I heard the king's name. Unfortunately, I don't remember what it was, but I do remember feeling secure all of a sudden. I knew the king's name, which meant I knew the name of the school, which meant I knew where I was, which meant I could give directions. It sounds silly when I put it that way, but I feel like there was something deeper symbolically going on. When I woke up, I had this single sentence repeating in my head. Magic will return to the world when truth returns. I don't know what it means. I don't really associate magic and truth. I more associate magic with fantasy, with stories, with imagination, not necessarily with truth. Though it does seem like things other than truth are dominant in our world at the moment. There was something else that emerged in me after that dream. This dream felt epic to me, like something out of an Arthurian legend. And I woke up with this sense that there's more to my life, not just mine, but everyone's life, than we realize. Like, we all have an important part to play, a destiny in a way, in bringing magic and truth back into the world. This might sound fanciful to some people, or even cliche, I'm sure, but I don't know, I find it reassuring. I think sometimes important messages come to us in dreams, and that dreams themselves can act as doors to other realities. The people in my dream seem like fairies to me. And to me, fairies are the embodiment of magic itself. I do think magic left our world for some time, along with the fairies. But now I think they might just be returning little by little. And one day, when the world has been re-enchanted, that fairy king might wake up. And then we'll all know his name. And things will be different. Thanks for watching, and thanks to everyone who submitted their stories for this one. If you have a fairy story you'd like to share, you can check out my website at scaryfairygodmother.com, link in the description. It has a spot where you can submit your stories, comments, questions, or suggestions. You can also sign up for my mailing list there. It's free to sign up. As always, special thanks goes out to all my supporters on Patreon who are helping to keep this content going and help me do things like build websites and hopefully expand in the future. I really am so thankful for you guys and the support you are giving this work. If you like this content and would like to support it, please check out my Patreon page. The link is in the description. Or you can click the join button below this video. The stories in this video came courtesy of subscribers and the Fairy Census at the Fairy Investigation Society. So thanks for everyone who submitted. The stories were edited for dramatic and narration reasons. If you would like to read the original Census stories, the link to the census is in the description. If you have had a fairy experience and would like to share it, please email it to me or submit it on the website. Also, please leave a comment below. Tell me what you thought of these stories. Tell me if you've had a fairy dream. Like, share, and subscribe if you're new. It really helps the channel when you do so. And hit the bell to receive notifications. And until next time, this has been a visit from your scary fairy godmother.